the sound of tearing paper cut through the bustling noise of the airport, a deliberate, almost defiant act. All eyes turned to the gate as a flight attendant, her face tense with disdain, stood holding the shredded remains of a ticket. Her voice was cold as she said, "You don't belong here." But what she didn't realize in that moment, what no one in the crowd could have guessed, was that the man she had just dismissed didn't just have a first-class ticket, he owned the entire airline. Before diving into the dramatic developments of the story, leave below in the comments section where you are watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share so more people can know. The airport buzzed with life. Announcements echoed overhead. Travelers hurried past, their footsteps blending into the chaotic symphony of the terminal. Families reunited with tearful embraces, while strangers brushed past each other without a second glance. Amidst it all, one man walked calmly toward the gate, ticket in hand. He was no stranger to the comforts of first class. A lifetime of hard work and perseverance had brought him here, a place he had earned, not inherited. Yet, as he approached the gate, his mind was not on luxury or privilege, but on the journey that had shaped him. From humble beginnings, he had risen through sheer grit and determination, carrying with him the weight of past struggles and the lessons they had taught him. Unaware of the storm brewing ahead, he prepared to board his flight, focused on his destination. What awaited him at the gate, however, was a moment that would challenge not just him, but the entire system he had fought so hard to navigate. As Marcus approached the gate, ticket in hand, he noticed the flight attendant's glance shift from the first-class sign to him. Her expression tightened, her lips pursing as though his presence had thrown her off balance. "Sir, this line is for first-class passengers only," she said, her tone sharp and clipped. Marcus calmly handed her his ticket without a word, refusing to let her assumption rattle him. But instead of scanning it, she snatched it from his hand, her fingers curling around it with an air of disdain. "This must be a mistake," she muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Before Marcus could respond, the unmistakable sound of ripping paper broke the moment. She tore his ticket in half, her eyes locked on his, daring him to protest. For a moment, Marcus froze, disbelief washing over him. Around them, murmurs started to ripple through the crowd. Travelers nearby exchanged incredulous glances, some reaching for their phones to record the unfolding drama. A few began to whisper their disapproval, their voices barely audible over the growing tension. "You don't belong here?" the flight attendant added, her words slicing through the air. The crowd grew louder, their murmurs turning into pointed comments. "That's not right," someone said. "She just tore his ticket for no reason," another chimed in. A young woman stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, firmly addressing the flight attendant. "Why did you tear his ticket?" The attendant's face flushed, her confidence faltering as the attention turned squarely on her. She glanced nervously at the growing crowd, her composure cracking under the weight of their judgment. Moments later, a man in uniform appeared, likely her supervisor. His brisk steps and concerned expression revealed his unease at the escalating situation. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, addressing the attendant directly. Before she could stammer a response, Marcus stepped forward, holding up the torn pieces of his ticket. "This," he said calmly, his voice even, "this is the problem." The supervisor's eyes widened as he took the fragments from Marcus. His frown deepened as he turned to the flight attendant. "Is this true?" he asked, his tone sharp. She stammered, searching for an explanation. I assumed." He raised a hand, cutting her off. "We'll deal with this later," he said firmly, his expression now tight with disapproval. Turning back to Marcus, he said, "I sincerely apologize, sir. Let me get this sorted out for you immediately." But the damage was done. The murmurs in the crowd had grown into a quiet roar, their phones still raised, capturing every moment. Marcus remained calm, his demeanor composed. He knew this was about more than just a ticket. It was about challenging assumptions, standing his ground, and ensuring accountability. As the supervisor hurried to issue a new ticket, Marcus's thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the weight of what had just happened, and the statement he was determined to make, not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever been judged unfairly. Seated in the quiet of the airport lounge, Marcus stared at the newly issued ticket in his hand. The hum of conversation around him felt distant, almost like static. His mind replayed the incident at the gate, the ripping sound of his ticket echoing like a symbol of something far deeper. This wasn't the first time he had encountered prejudice. Marcus had spent years navigating systemic bias, battling assumptions that seemed to follow him no matter how far he rose. Each experience left a mark, a reminder of the uphill climb he had endured. Yet this moment felt heavier. It wasn't just an isolated act of disrespect. It represented the gatekeeping mindset that still persisted even in spaces he had earned access to. But Marcus wasn't the man he used to be. The anger and frustration that might have once consumed him had been replaced with patience and a quiet resolve. He understood now that true power lay in maintaining composure and turning moments of injustice into opportunities for meaningful change. His thoughts were interrupted when a young woman approached, phone in hand. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, her tone kind but firm. "I recorded what happened earlier. If you need it, I can send it to you." Marcus looked up, offering her a small smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." Around him, other passengers nodded in solidarity, their supportive gestures subtle but significant. Some had spoken up during the incident, others had recorded it silently, but their presence and actions spoke volumes. These moments of support, however small, mattered. They were proof that not everyone chose to stay silent in the face of discrimination. They reminded Marcus that while prejudice still existed, so did allies, people willing to step up and challenge it. As the woman walked away, Marcus held on to the thought that these individual acts of courage were the seeds of larger change. This wasn't just about him. It was about creating a ripple effect. He resolved that the events of the day wouldn't end with a personal resolution. Instead, they would serve as a starting point for a broader conversation about accountability, fairness, and the value of standing together against injustice. As Marcus waited near the gate, the supervisor reappeared, his expression still apologetic but tinged with unease. "Sir, I deeply regret what happened earlier. We've reissued your ticket, and I want to assure you this matter will be addressed internally," he said, his tone measured but hurried. Marcus nodded politely, holding the new ticket in his hand, but not moving. "I appreciate your effort to resolve this," he began, his voice calm but firm. "However, this isn't just about a ticket or a simple misunderstanding. I'll need the contact information for your corporate office." The supervisor blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Of course," he said, fumbling for a pen and card. "May I ask why?" Marcus fixed him with a steady gaze. "Let's just say this incident isn't over," he replied evenly, leaving the weight of his words hanging in the air. The supervisor swallowed hard, scribbling down the information and handing it over with a nervous nod. Back in his office later that evening, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the contact card and the video from the bystander, now sitting in his inbox. This wasn't going to be a complaint filled with anger or demands. It was going to be a story, a reflection of what had happened and what it meant. He opened his laptop and began typing. "Dear CEO's name. Today, an incident occurred at one of your gates that I believe represents more than just an error in judgment. It's a symptom of a deeper issue within the culture of your company. Let me tell you what happened." Marcus described the flight attendant's actions in vivid detail, the dismissal in her tone, the ripping of the ticket, and the murmurs of the crowd. He didn't focus solely on her actions, but framed them as reflective of a larger systemic problem. This was not an isolated moment of poor service. It was a reflection of assumptions, biases, and barriers that remain unchecked. "While I could view this as a personal affront, I see it as an opportunity for your airline to acknowledge these issues and take meaningful steps toward change." He ended with a clear but respectful call to action. "I am writing to you not just as a passenger, but as someone invested in seeing your company succeed. Addressing this incident is about more than an apology. It's about creating a culture where such moments don't occur in the first place. I'm happy to discuss actionable steps to help you achieve that." Satisfied, Marcus hit send, leaning back in his chair. This was no longer about him. It was about challenging a system and pushing for accountability. 2 days later, Marcus's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered. "Hello, this is CEO's name, dear CEO of the airline. I've received your email and want to sincerely apologize for what happened." The voice on the other end said, respectful yet tense, "We take this matter very seriously." Marcus listened silently for a moment, allowing the CEO's discomfort to linger before responding. "I appreciate your apology," he said, his tone calm but direct. But this isn't just about an apology. It's about systemic change. What happened to me wasn't unique. It's reflective of a culture that needs to be addressed. The CEO paused, the tension in his voice growing. What can we do to make this right, he asked. Marcus's reply was deliberate. Start with accountability. Acknowledge what happened, address it publicly, and take actionable steps to ensure it doesn't happen again, not just for me, but for everyone. The CEO agreed to a meeting, his tone shifting to one of urgency. Marcus knew this wasn't just a moment for him to demand change. It was an opportunity to drive it on a larger scale. This wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a movement that could challenge not just the airline's culture, but the systemic prejudices that persisted far beyond it. Marcus stepped into the corporate headquarters of the airline, a sleek glass building that exuded wealth and power. The lobby was a study in luxury. Marble floors gleamed under warm lights, and towering glass windows showcased a panoramic view of the city skyline. Every detail screamed efficiency and success, but Marcus saw beyond the polished veneer. He knew this fortress of privilege was built on the loyalty of countless customers, many of whom, like him, had faced moments of dismissal and disrespect. A receptionist led him through a series of corridors to a conference room where the airline's top executives waited. The air inside was tense. Leather chairs surrounded a long mahogany table, and the city skyline loomed behind them, visible through a wall of windows. The CEO, a tall man in a crisp suit, stood to greet Marcus, his smile carefully rehearsed. Around the table, the other executives exchanged nervous glances, their discomfort palpable. "Mr. Taylor, thank you for coming," the CEO began, gesturing to a seat at the table. Marcus sat down, his posture calm and composed. He led a moment of silent stretch before speaking. "I appreciate the invitation," he said, his tone measured but firm. "Before we begin, let me ask, do any of you know who I am?" The CEO hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. "We understand you're a passenger who experienced an unfortunate incident," he said cautiously. Marcus let the pause linger, then leaned forward slightly. "I'm also one of your largest shareholders." The room shifted instantly. The executives stiffened, their eyes widening as realization dawned. The balance of power had changed, and Marcus was no longer just an aggrieved passenger. He was someone with influence, someone who could demand more than an apology. With their attention fully on him, Marcus began. "What happened to me at the gate wasn't just an individual failure. It's part of a larger culture that your company has allowed to fester, one that tolerates assumptions and biases, even in spaces meant to reflect excellence and professionalism." The CEO nodded, his expression cautious. "We agree this incident was unacceptable. What do you propose we do to ensure it doesn't happen again?" Marcus didn't miss a beat. "You need systemic changes, not surface-level fixes. First, acknowledge what happened publicly. Transparency is the first step in rebuilding trust. Second, implement mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees from gate staff to executives." He glanced around the table, letting his words sink in before continuing. "But training alone isn't enough. You need structural changes. Overhaul your hiring practices to prioritize diversity, establish a council to address inclusion and equity within the company, and create a clear pathway for addressing incidents like this so they aren't ignored or mishandled." One of the executives, a middle-aged man with a skeptical expression, spoke up. "This will be costly and disruptive. Are you suggesting we prioritize this over other initiatives?" Marcus turned to him, his gaze steady. "I'm suggesting you prioritize your customers and employees. A company that fails to reflect fairness and respect loses more than money. It loses trust. And trust is your most valuable asset in a competitive industry." The CEO leaned forward, his voice quieter but resolute. "We're open to these changes, but we'd like your input to shape them." Marcus nodded. "I'll help. But let me be clear. This isn't just about policies. It's about creating a culture where everyone, passengers and employees, feels they belong. That's how you ensure moments like this don't happen again." As the meeting ended, Marcus walked out of the conference room, leaving the executives with more than a to-do list. He left them with the weight of accountability and a challenge to rethink their approach not just to customer service, but to their company's values. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a turning point, one that could ripple far beyond the airline's glass walls. A week after the meeting, the airline released a bold public statement on their social media platforms and website. The message was direct, transparent, and unapologetically honest, a stark contrast to the typical corporate language of damage control. The statement began, "We acknowledge that an incident at one of our gates revealed shortcomings in our company's culture and practices. This was not an isolated event, but a symptom of a larger issue that we are committed to addressing. Effective immediately, we are implementing comprehensive changes to ensure our airline reflects the values of fairness, respect, and inclusion." The airline outlined several key initiatives: mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, from entry-level staff to executives, a revamped hiring process to ensure equity and representation, and the creation of a Diversity and Inclusion Council, with Marcus Taylor as an advisor. The response was immediate. The post went viral, garnering thousands of shares and comments. Some customers shared their own stories of discrimination in customer service, expressing hope that this could lead to real change. Employees also chimed in, many praising the company's willingness to address such a sensitive issue head-on. For Marcus, the public response was validating but not surprising. Moments like these held the potential to inspire far-reaching impact, but he knew that social media buzz was only the beginning. The real work lay in the execution. Inside the airline, however, implementing the changes wasn't easy. Resistance came from multiple corners. Longtime employees who dismissed the training as unnecessary, executives who questioned the financial cost, and skeptics who doubted the sincerity of the initiative. Marcus faced these challenges head-on. In one particularly heated meeting, a senior executive argued that the changes were excessive. Marcus listened patiently, then responded with calm determination. "This isn't just about avoiding bad press. It's about creating a company people are proud to work for and support. If we can't do that, we're already failing." Despite the pushback, Marcus remained a steadfast advocate. He attended meetings, provided input on training materials, and met with employees to hear their concerns. Slowly but surely, the culture began to shift. Employees who had initially been hesitant started to share their own stories of how the training sessions had opened their eyes to unconscious biases. The airline also began to see tangible results. Customer satisfaction scores improved, and incidents of discrimination complaints declined significantly. Perhaps most importantly, employees and customers alike began to feel that the airline was committed to creating an environment of fairness and inclusion. For Marcus, these small victories were proof that change, while slow and challenging, was possible. And as the airline's transformation gained momentum, he knew they were building something more enduring, a culture that valued every individual, not just as a passenger or employee, but as a person deserving of respect. Weeks after the incident, Marcus received a letter in the mail. The envelope was plain, the handwriting neat, but unpolished. Inside was a handwritten apology from the flight attendant, whose actions had sparked this journey. The letter began, "Mr. Taylor, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to reach out. I've had time to reflect on what happened that day, and I realize now how much harm I caused not just to you, but to everyone who witnessed my actions. My assumptions were wrong, and my actions were unfair. I let my biases control me, and for that, I am deeply sorry." The letter continued with her personal reflection on how the incident had forced her to confront her own prejudices. She described attending the new diversity training sessions, where she began to understand the deeper impact of her behavior, not just on Marcus, but on the broader culture of exclusion she had unknowingly perpetuated. "This experience has changed me. I'm committed to being better, not just as a professional, but as a person. I will carry the weight of that moment with me as a reminder to judge less and listen more." Marcus read the letter twice, then folded it carefully. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about accountability. For him, the flight attendant's growth was a testament to what could happen when people were given the chance to reflect, learn, and change. The ripple effects of the incident extended far beyond the airline. Marcus began receiving messages from employees, customers, and even executives in other industries who had heard about the changes at the airline. One email stood out. It came from the CEO of a major hotel chain, who admitted that their own company had faced similar challenges. Inspired by the airline's approach, They had started implementing similar diversity and inclusion initiatives, citing Marcus's story as the catalyst for change. Social media platforms became a hub for individuals sharing their own experiences with discrimination, often referencing the viral story of Marcus's encounter. Advocacy groups reached out, inviting him to speak at events and workshops about the importance of challenging systemic biases. One particularly poignant moment came when Marcus received a letter from a young college student. She wrote about how hearing his story had inspired her to pursue a career in advocacy. "Your courage gave me the confidence to believe that one voice can make a difference," she wrote. For Marcus, these moments were the true measure of success. It wasn't just about the policies or the headlines. It was about the lives impacted, the perspectives changed, and the conversations sparked. As he reflected on the journey, Marcus realized that this wasn't just his fight. It was a collective effort to create a world where respect and fairness weren't privileges, but standards. And while there was still a long way to go, he was proud to know that the ripples of one moment had grown into waves of change. Sarah Jacked writes, as Marcus looked back on the journey that began with a torn ticket, he realized it was never just about that single act of discrimination. It was about the layers beneath it, the assumptions, biases, and systemic issues that allowed such moments to happen in the first place. What started as an instance of personal injustice had grown into something far more significant, an opportunity to create meaningful change. This journey wasn't easy. It required patience, persistence, and a strategic approach. Marcus could have reacted with anger or sought immediate retaliation, but he chose a different path, a path that demanded accountability without sacrificing dignity. By staying composed and leveraging his platform, he transformed a moment of prejudice into a movement for progress. The changes at the airline, the ripple effects across industries, and the personal growth of those involved all stood as proof of what could happen when people refused to let injustice go unchallenged. Marcus knew there was still a long way to go, but the progress made so far was a reminder that change, while slow, is always possible. As the story draws to a close, Marcus's message is clear. Moments of prejudice and injustice are not just challenges, they're opportunities. Opportunities to stand up, speak out, and inspire change. To those watching, he offers a simple but powerful call to action. Don't underestimate the impact of your voice, whether it's speaking up for someone, challenging unfair systems, or even just choosing kindness. Every small act of courage matters. Together, we can create a world where respect, fairness, and inclusion are the norm, not the exception. The story ends with a reflection on hope, not a blind hope, but one rooted in action and persistence. As Marcus's journey shows, real change doesn't come from one person alone. It comes from a collective effort to move forward, one step at a time. If her story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that inspire. Together, we can create a better, more inclusive world, one step at a time.